Welcome to GameFellas, episode 5, the Retro to Modern Gaming podcast. How you all doing tonight, fellas?
Good. Yeah, good, thanks.
Tonight we got Soren with us from the UK. We have Mark with us, Mark MSX. Mark, I don't even know your last name, man.
It's because it's a mystery. No one knows it.
Okay, well, that's fine. We'll just call you Mark MSX after your ancient Japanese computer.
Mm-hmm.
And we have Derik Moore, who's going to be mostly off camera tonight, just being our producer and answering questions for us as we go. So let's get started with what we've been playing before we get to our topics. So Mark, why don't you start us off, man? What you been playing?
Well, I think I have a good variety this time. So it was news to me that this new run and gun came out just out of nowhere for me, but I guess a lot of people have been excited about it.
Blazing Chrome.
Yeah. I've been going in on Blazing Chrome. I really like it a lot. I'm hoping to get a 1cc of normal mode pretty soon. It's pretty hard, like harder than your typical indie game, I guess you could say.
Yeah, Blazing Chrome, I've been waiting for 2 years now, I think, since I first heard about it. I believe it was done by, I mentioned this on the last podcast as I brought it up briefly. I believe it was done by a couple, like a guy and a girl in Brazil, I think, a little indie studio in Brazil. And I think their aim was Contra Hardcore mixed with like Metal Slug is the vibe, and some Contra 3. I definitely know some things about Contra 3 too. But tell us a little bit about it, Mark, and what your experience has been so far, and the gameplay, what it's like, and all that stuff.
Well, I think actually the game that reminds me the most of gameplay-wise, it does have some Metal Slug elements, is kind of a cross between Contra and Mega Man X, actually. I feel like there's a lot of Mega Man X going on in that game because...
Why?
Well, for one, you have a variable jump. You don't have most run and guns have a static jump where, like, you know, Castlevania style, you hit jump and you just jump. In Blazing Chrome, it's like Mega Man, where you can kind of do little jumps, you can control your airspeed and stuff like that. So it feels a little more platformy than something like Metal Slug. And also, I just feel like there's a lot of little homages to Mega Man X. Like the main character kind of looks like Zero from Mega Man X, and your blaster kind of reminds me of like a Buster Cannon type thing. Some other cool things about the game is that it has a locking mechanic, which I noticed is kind of becoming a little more trendy in running guns and stuff, where I think Cuphead has it too, where you can hold yourself in place and then kind of free shoot in 8 directions.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. So that adds and the game really does a good job, the level design, pushing that mechanic and making it really relevant, because you're going to have to use it quite a bit. And as like in Metal Slug, there's nothing like that. So you run into situations in Metal, because I play a lot of Metal Slug, where you want to shoot diagonally but hold still, but that just won't happen. So
yeah, I think Contra Hardcore did that too. Like that was I think if you had a 6-button controller, you hit I think it was X or Y, one of the top buttons, and it locked you in place, and you could shoot in all directions. So
oh, really?
Definitely mechanic.
That must be where all these games are kind of getting that idea, because I've noticed that even in AM2R, that Metroid remake, it has a lock mechanic too.
Yeah. Yeah, the game looks fantastic. I mean, the art style really reminds me of Contra Hardcore, like a lot. Even down to the kind of dull. The colors are kind of a little bit dull, you know. Like,
yeah.
Really, it looks like a Genesis game almost. It's definitely a high up on their inspiration list. I think was Hardcore. But yeah, I'm glad you've been playing that, man. I've played a little bit. My problem is I've been playing too much other stuff too. So I've been trying to play it, but I've only just dipped my toe in. But I'm going to talk a little bit about Blazing Chrome too when it's my turn. So I'll let you continue. What else have you been playing, man?
Well, a little Soul Calibur 6 that I've been trying to get you to play.
Yeah, we got to do that soon for sure.
I've been really enjoying it. I'm a little sad because it looks like it's not gonna make the long run for a fighting game. You know how that is, where they get about a year or so, and then some survive and some don't. It looks like it's not going to survive as far as playing it competitively, really.
Okay.
But it's still a really well-made game. I just kind of feel like in the world of fighting games, for some reason, there always seems to be room for just one 3D fighter. Like, the fighting game audience cannot handle more than one at a time or something. So It dies at the altar of Tekken, but
why do you think that is that it's not going to last? What's different about it than previous Soul Calibur games?
Well, I don't think any of them really lasted that well other than Soul Calibur 2. That was the one that was mostly competitively played and stuff like that. I think it's the second best one after Soul Calibur 2. I think 2 is still better because I still play a lot of Calibur 2. And it's funny because there's a lot of mechanics, obviously, between 3 and 6, but I didn't play much of 3 through 5. So I always just compare it to 2 because I think that was what they were trying to capture. But it has things like meters and supers and stuff like that that I kind of feel like they're all right, but yeah. It's not quite as good as 2.
I noticed, is it Kulik or Kalik? What's his name?
Kalik?
Yeah, he has long hair now. It looks like that's him. He was my main man back in 1 and 2 anyway.
So when he's in his default mode, he looks like his usual self. And then there's like a soul charge mechanic, which was in Soul Calibur 2, but it didn't require meter. But in Soul Calibur 6, it's like a special move now. It's like V-Trigger or something in Street Fighter. So when he goes Soul Charge, that's when he gets like the Super Saiyan type look thing going or whatever, like the evil Ryu look.
Okay. Interesting. All right. But it's good, though, even though you don't think it's going to last. It's still a solid entry in the Soul Calibur series, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I think it's the best one since 2. I'm really enjoying it. It's probably my favorite 3D fighter out right now. I know the Tekken fans probably won't agree, but I like Tekken too, but I like it more.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just when you look at the online statistics of how many people are playing it, it's just going.
It's dropping, yeah.
Oh, it's dropping hard. It's just.
Well, you and me will spike those numbers a little bit at some point when we get to it. What else? You got anything else? You said you got some more stuff. What else have you been playing, man?
Yeah, so I've been trying to play a few more modern games since, I'm always stuck playing retro games. So I have been playing more modern games, and I slip in my memory for a sec what else I've been playing. Because I mentioned Hitman 2 last time. I've been playing a little bit of that.
You mentioned that, yeah. Yeah. Or Hitman 2016 or whatever, or the more recent one.
It's the new one, so it's like Hitman 2018 now.
Oh, okay.
So that was on Steam sale, so I picked it up. Yeah, I think that franchise, I think it's the best stealth franchise out right now, but it's kind of like Soul Calibur 6, where it's like people kind of know about it, but it's not super popular.
Right. I haven't played a Hitman game since the original Xbox, I think. It's been a long time. It's probably the last time I dabbled in that series. I mean, it's some stealth-based gameplay, I'm assuming, and then I remember sneaking around and assassinating people and stuff like that. Is that kind of how it is still?
Yeah. Were you playing, do you remember which one you were playing? Was it Silent Assassin?
No, it was the original Xbox. I don't remember.
Yeah. So it would have been either Blood Money, Silent Assassin, or Contracts. Those are the 3 on the Xbox.
No idea. I don't remember which one it was.
I would guess it was Silent Assassin because that was kind of the more popular one.
Yeah, it could have been.
Yeah, where you change disguises a lot and has an ass load of levels. One of them's like in a snowy level in Japan. That's freaking hard. You get sniped the entire time.
Nice. Okay. All right, cool. Well, thanks, Mark. Soren, what have you been playing, man?
Yo, yeah, I've been playing basically 2 things quite a lot. So the first one is Super Mario Maker 2, which obviously came out.
Of course.
Recently. Yeah, I've been playing a lot of that. I've got an opinion of it, which may not be particularly popular, but it's not that I don't like the game, because I really do like it. I think it's awesome. But I played it and completed the kind of story mode, the like single player content, which is kind of like a really elaborate tutorial, essentially. It's just like 100 levels that you don't even have to play all 100, but you go through it and it's kind of like teaching you different mechanics and things like that. So I played that, really enjoyed that, and I've obviously been playing the other modes, which use all the user-created levels. But I've kind of got to a point where I'm like, I don't want to just kind of like sit there and only play that, like, because I've kind of, I'm now at a point where I can only kind of just every now and again have a go at that endless mode, and I don't know. I feel like it's the kind of game where I don't necessarily now feel like I have to sit there and have a big old gaming session on it. I can kind of maybe play it for an hour and then pick it up another day and play it for an hour or so. Like, I can see it very much being one of those games where I'd always want to have it on me with my Switch as an option, but it's not the game that I would want to sit down and spend hours playing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, how does endless mode work exactly? You mentioned endless mode.
So I think the endless mode replaced what they had on the first one, which is they had a mode where you got 100 lives, basically, and you had to kind of just complete a certain amount of levels within those 100 lives. And they decided to change it. I don't entirely know why. I think maybe it was, so that everyone's always competing for a high score and you just keep trying to beat your own score and that. But now there's no limit to the levels you do. You start with fewer lives. So depending on the difficulty, you start with a different amount of lives. And it's now just endless. So you just get level after level after level. You can gain a few lives on each level to try and kind of gain back some of the lives you've lost along the way. And yeah, you're just basically, you keep going until you run out of lives, and then that's your high score.
Okay.
So it's really good for from a competitive standpoint, and if you want to kind of compete on the leaderboards and everything, and it is fun. And the main draw of Mario Maker 2 is all of the awesome user created levels that Nintendo just wouldn't have ever even thought to come up with.
All the penis levels.
Yeah, exactly. If there's a level where you can run around a massive penis, then yeah, I'm all for that. That's fine. No, I mean there's some really good stuff there. But yeah, I don't know. It's I do really enjoy the game, but I don't see it as something that now I feel I'd want to sit down and play all evening.
Well, maybe has the novelty kind of wore off? Because I mean, the first one came out and people's minds were kind of blown. It seemed like really crazy stuff. And this one, I mean, kind of seems like more of the same, I guess, except on Switch, right? I mean, I'm sure there's a little more you can do with it, more options. It looks like just looking at the video Derik's playing for us, it looks like there's more you can do with the environments, and as far as diverse environments. But you think it's just kind of the novelty's worn off on it, or what do you think?
No, I wouldn't say the novelty's worn off. I mean, it's something that is probably going to help, which they clearly are going to do, is support it with updates. So, there's already a really obvious glaring space on the level theme section of the map creator that is clearly going to have another type of level that you can create. So they're already kind of giving little clues that they're clearly going to support it and update it and probably do some sort of DLC or something.
Oh, DLC.
Which, yeah, we'll come to. But no, I mean, I quite like how Nintendo supports quite a few of its games. I mean, it still surprises me how much they're supporting Mario Tennis Aces, because the player base for that cannot be anything close to some of their other games, and yet, that game keeps getting monthly updates of new characters and things like that. So, yeah, I'm all for them adding more to Mario Maker 2, and I think they will. Yeah, it's such a tough one because it's clearly really popular and going to remain really popular. People stream it all the time. But for me personally, I can really, really enjoy it, but I'll happily just play it in small bursts now. I don't feel
you gotta be super creative to play games like that. I was never into the Mario Makers because I don't know. I'll watch people make crazy levels all day, but when it comes to actually making one myself, that's just not really how my mind works. I kind of just want to play a game and not have to worry about creating a game, you know, which is in essence what you're doing. Some people are just really good at it, you know, and they love it. But yeah, for me, it's Mario Maker doesn't really interest me because it's all about the creation aspect. Although I guess you could get it and just play other people's levels, you know, that'd be fun too.
Yeah, and that is actually something that I would say and recommend to anyone. Like, if you think that you need to make levels to get your full money's worth out of that game, then don't worry about that at all. Like, you could easily pick this game up and never touch the create mode,
right? And
you will have plenty to do, like, for a long time. So I wouldn't worry so much about that.
Okay.
But the other game that I've been playing a lot recently, and this absolutely is a game that I'd happily play all day, is Bloodstained Ritual of the Night.
Ah, nice.
Which, yeah, is for people who...
What are you playing it on? Are you playing it on PC or Switch? Because I heard the Switch version has problems.
So, okay, so I actually first bought it on PC, and I was playing it on there, and obviously it looks beautiful, and it runs super smooth, and it's great. And then I enjoyed it so much that I thought, I really want to be able to play this when I'm on the train, and the only way I can do that is if I buy the Switch copy, so I bought that as well. And yeah, it does take a huge hit in the graphics and the FPS, but it's actually okay. Like, people were kind of saying that it runs pretty badly, and yeah, I mean, if you compare it to the other versions, it isn't on par with them, but it runs fine. Like, I've not had any issues with it. It just looks a bit ugly, like, because all the textures are much lower resolution.
Down-resed a bit.
Yeah, but I think it plays absolutely fine on the Switch. And the developers have said that they are aware the Switch version has issues, so they're focusing a lot of their resources on sorting that out. So
yeah, I'm sure they'll be able to. I can't imagine it's that technically demanding of a game. It's like remember all the issues Toe Jam and Earl back in the Groove had on the Switch when it started, and they've fixed a lot of that stuff. Frame rate issues and all the same type of stuff. I'm guessing that Bloodstained has.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
Yeah. I think they will.
I think that something comes up with indie games that I've noticed is some of them that are not that intensive, like on paper, can be surprisingly intensive based on how well they were programmed. Like Dan Michael Limited 3 on the Switch and on PC. When you look at it, it's a shmup, and it looks cool, but it doesn't look like, oh my god, this is a graphic powerhouse. But that thing will rip through your graphics card and CPU like none other. I could barely, my laptop could play Metal Gear Solid 5 at a smooth frame rate, but it could not play that game beyond like 640 or some like ridiculously low resolution.
640 by 480.
Yeah, like the smallest resolution ever, just because I don't know what happened with the optimization of that game, but it rips through your memory like no other. And I kind of suspect Bloodstained might be similar, where it's not really well optimized for performance.
It probably is the case. But like I said, they'll probably be able to fix it. I mean, the stuff they've gotten running on the Switch is kind of amazing. So I'm sure they'll be able to do that. Okay.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, like, they've got things like what was it, Doom and Wolfenstein 2 running.
And The Witcher 3 now.
And The Witcher 3, like,
if that'll run, anything will run.
Yeah.
Are those all Unreal games? I can't remember what.
I think CD Projekt has their own engine. I'm pretty sure. So that's their own. That's their own.
Witcher 3 is definitely its own engine.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know Unreal is ridiculously good at getting on stuff that's not that powerful.
No, right. Doom runs on ID Tech 4.
None of them are Unreal, huh?
No, I'm sorry, ID Tech 5. What was the other one?
Wolfenstein, I think. Yeah.
Wolfenstein runs on the same thing, ID Tech 5.
Okay. And then there's Skyrim too, but that's the same Elder Scrolls engine, which we talked about in a previous episode about using Soren bringing up that they've been using the same engine for 10 years or 15 years or something.
Yeah,
so,
it's getting ridiculous.
All right, cool. I guess I'll move on to me then. And I've been playing. Well, I'll start with a little story, and that is I went to Utah recently and to visit a friend of mine, and we took a trip around a bunch of different national parks. But I brought my Switch with me, and in the evenings, we played Cuphead every night. And I had never played it. I just got it when it came out on the Switch. I wanted to go through a couple little facts about Cuphead that maybe some people don't know that's pretty remarkable about this game. I got a list right here. The studio is an indie studio called MDHR, basically founded by two Canadian guys named Chad and Jared Moldenhauer, I think is how you pronounce their last name. Basically, these guys had to remortgage their houses in order to complete this game. They just risked it all. And obviously, they tried to emulate I guess it's called the rubber hose style of animation used in the cartoons in the 1930s. Max and Dave Fleischer, their studio, did Superman, and they did Betty Boop and a bunch of other stuff. And of course, Disney did some similar things too. That was the style. They basically approached the development of this game as if they were creating it in the 1930s, complete with all hand-drawn animation. It was all drawn by hand. It was colored, I think, in Photoshop, but it was all hand-drawn. And they commissioned musicians, big band and jazz musicians, to do 51 music tracks, and then basically, degraded the way it sounded to make it sound more authentic. Same with the visual style. If you look at it, it's funny, in the actual game, you can adjust how much noise you want on the screen, how damaged you want it to look, or how blurry. It's kind of cool. They went through 150 character designs before they came up with the idea. Which actually, the idea of Cuphead came from a 1936 Japanese propaganda film where a man with a teacup for a head morphs into a tank. That's where they got the idea for this game. Really weird stuff. But anyway, the game's been a huge success. I think it's sold like 4 million copies so far, which is amazing. Considering the gameplay of this game, and Mark, you and me being shmup and run-and-gun guys, this is a hardcore game in terms of how difficult it is and the gameplay style. I'd say a lot of it's a boss rush where you're fighting bosses. This game apparently has the Guinness World Record, which I didn't know there was one for this, but there's a Guinness World Record for the most bosses in a run-and-gun game, and this has the Guinness World Record with, I think, 30 bosses this game has, which is also pretty crazy. Yeah, it's got an overworld, kind of like Mario 3, where you go around. You can select, the running gun stages. There's some shmup stages. There's a couple other oddball stages that are a little different. It's an amazing game. I love it. It's balls hard. I haven't even tried expert mode yet because I haven't beat it yet on normal. But me and my buddy played it every night and just had a complete blast. I mean, we died over and over and over and over again. There's a guy in the game you can go to, and if you talk to him, he'll tell you how many times you've died, and it's always depressing to go to him and talk to him. Mark, have you beaten Cuphead yet? How much time have you put into it?
I haven't beaten it, but I've gotten about halfway through it, I'd say. Then I kind of
that's about where I'm at. Yeah, I'm about
phased out a little bit.
Yeah, I'm about, I think, 60% through or something like that, and it took a little break to play some other stuff, but I'm definitely going to go back to it, probably with my brother at some point, because I think my nieces would love, obviously not to play it. They're a little young. It's too hard, but they'd love to watch it, just because the animation is so much fun to look at. But do you know that Elon Musk also is a fan of the game and I guess he's getting it to run in Teslas now. I don't know if you guys knew that, but just stuff like that, man, is great. There's a Netflix animated series coming out now based on the game with, I'm assuming, the same style.
Yeah, it broke the wall of, shmup players always sit around and say the genre has no mainstream appeal. It could never be done. It broke. Can you imagine? If it was a pure shmup, I don't know, but it definitely is a lot more hardcore than what you normally come across, like Shovel Knight or something like that.
Right, and I wouldn't even call Shovel Knight a run and gun even.
No, I mean like an indie. You know how indie games are generally easier than the original, I guess, older generation games.
Yeah, exactly. It did it. You're right. It broke the wall. Could you imagine a shmup or even a run and gun selling 4 million copies nowadays? It's crazy, And obviously, it's because of the animation.
That's it.
Sold people, But the gameplay is also good. It's extremely, like I said, extremely hardcore. But Yeah, that scene Derek's playing right now, that moon boss, it's just amazing, dude. So yeah, Cuphead is great.
My favorite thing about Cuphead is the DF Retro. Have you seen the DF Retro episode about it?
I don't think so, no.
Okay, so they're really obsessed with graphical fidelity and stuff. I watch their channel; it's pretty good. But usually with games, they go through all the settings, they count the pixels, they like really get into that. But Cuphead runs the same no matter what it's on usually because it's really specific art style and it's more animation than traditional games. And so they're just like, they don't know what to say about the game. They're like, it runs at this resolution here, doesn't have pixels. It's just funny.
Yeah.
How they don't really have much to say about it because the art style is so...
That's the one thing I'm not sure about, how they actually accomplish it, because you're right. It's like, I look at it and there's rarely a moment where I feel like I'm not watching a cartoon, and I'm like, how did they do this, and how does it run so well on everything? I think Derik mentioned it once to me, that it basically runs on anything, I mean, it runs good on the Switch. There's a little bit of slowdown, I think, and well, not really slowdown, but there's a little bit of frame rate issues on the Switch every once in a while, but not bad, it's still very fluid. But
it's actually been done before in do you remember the Aladdin game for Super Nintendo?
Yeah.
They did the same thing where they hand drew all the sprites, so it's like they're hand drawn animations. Then they just had to start chopping out frames to make the animations. To
make it fit. I think Earthworm Jim was the same. I think with Earthworm Jim it did that too. Yeah.
So it's been done. It's just
but in this case
at scale.
In this case it looks it looks exactly like a cartoon would. So yeah, so Cuphead is great. If you haven't played it, it's like $20. You should. Even if you suck at video games, you should. It's worth giving it a shot, I think. Play it on easy mode or whatever. There is a practice or an easy mode, I think. So the next game is Blazing Chrome, which Mark was talking about. I don't have too much to say about it, but I do want to say one thing because I haven't played it a lot yet. But my buddy and I, we were really bummed that there was no online multiplayer for Blazing Chrome. So we found this program called Parsec, which basically lets you use your PC as a server, and you can stream the game to the other person. And they plug in their controller. They use Parsec also, and it'll let them use a controller, and it records their inputs. So we were playing with that, and it seems to work pretty well. It might be kind of hard with shmups and with running guns and games that you need that are very precise. But Cuphead was one of the games they were actually showcasing with Parsec. So, but we tried Blazing Chrome, and yeah, it's pretty cool, man. If you haven't checked out Parsec, I'd suggest checking it out. There's a paid one where you can use their cloud computers, which works better, but you got to pay. I think it's fairly inexpensive, but I think it's by the hour, which kind of sucks. But I think it's like, I don't know, 50 cents an hour or something, or 70 cents an hour, which really isn't that bad. But so yeah, Blazing Chrome, I'm going to talk more about that on another episode when I played it more. But the last thing I want to talk about briefly is I've been playing a lot of Star Fox, the original Star Fox. I got a bug up my ass recently. I decided that I wanted to play Star Fox. I watched this video. It's a brilliant video by Splashwave is the channel. Jerome is his name. He does these amazing mostly retro game videos, and he did the making of Star Fox. And I watched it, and I was like, wow, it was really cool to see how the game came together. And granted, it's kind of antiquated now, and the frame rate is low, but I'm actually having a lot of fun with it. When I first turned it on, I was like, this is really janky, man. The frame rate's like 15 frames a second maybe. But I got used to it, and now I'm gonna 1cc every route. I've already been able to do it on the easier route, and I'm gonna do the next two routes also. So those will show up on my channel here at some point, probably soon. But yeah,
you
dude,
didn't refuse to review it. You didn't drop the controller and be like, "Oh, this is too antiquated. I can't play this."
No, man. It's funny because I had that thought for about maybe 30 seconds to a minute when I first turned it on. I'm like, ooh, I don't know if I can do this. But you know what? If you just stick to it and you realize what made the game good, 25 years ago, and then you know, just give it a shot, then it starts to become fun. You adapt, you know. It's like, I'm going to talk more about this later, obviously, but I think like people that are frame rate whores are not going to be able to play this game, because they're just people that demand 60 frames a second. They won't be able to play Star Fox. But if you can,
unless you overclock it in a RetroArch, then you could do it.
well, yeah, I guess you could do it then. But yeah, if you're playing it on original hardware like I am, you're not going to be able to do it. But if you can just give it a chance. And I enjoyed the hell out of this game when I was a kid. I loved it. I think I was 13 when it came out, and I played this game so much, and I haven't played it since. It's one of those games I haven't picked up again in 25 years. And I did, and it's like it all just came back. And some of it's nostalgia for sure, but I'm having fun. So what does it matter? So anyway, yeah, Star Fox, having a lot of fun with that. Surprisingly, I'm actually kind of surprised, and I'll end up making some videos out of it. So, all right, that's what I've been playing. So let's move on, shall we, to our first discussion topic, which is DLC, the dreaded DLC. The good, the bad
content.
Yeah, the good, the bad, and the dishonest business strategies is what we're going to go on about here. So why don't you start us off, Mark? Tell us what you think about DLC.
I don't like it. Like,
man.
I could come up with some really articulate, snazzy ways to say I don't like it, but it's just really grating on me these days. I think there was a time where DLC was a novel concept that players appreciated. It's like, hey, I remember the first time I ever heard of it was with Splinter Cell on the Xbox. So they made Splinter Cell, and then, I don't know, however long after, they're like, hey, there's an extra level in Splinter Cell you can download. And at that time, you didn't pay to download it, you just downloaded it. So I was like, oh, cool. So I downloaded and played it. And that was my first experience with DLC. And it seemed like such a cool idea. It's like, hey, let's download more shit to the games that we've already played and beaten and play a little extra content. So, and then it kind of started. I don't know how far you want me to talk about this. So, do you guys want to say
give some more specific examples of what irritates you? Like, do you have any specific?
Oh, okay.
I know you could probably talk about what Street Fighter, which Street Fighter was the one with all the problems that.
Street Fighter Cross Tekken, DLC on disc.
Well, there's DLC on disc. Is that even something that happens that much anymore, or was that kind of,
they wised up?
Yeah, but
because people data mine every game now. So you put anything on that disc, they're gonna find it.
Yeah, right. So developers are trying to hide DLC on the disc already there. So then you just pay to unlock it, which that's shady, man. And
then Capcom came up with a whole story about. And a lot of people have come up with all kinds of different ways to kind of get around, like, no, wait a minute. Like, if you think about it, it could have been, but what actually bothers me the most about DLC isn't the typical, like, DLC on disc stuff or, like, even stuff that affects you when the game's out. It really annoys me because you can tell these days the standard has just lowered with what they will give you in a game. Like, Dead or Alive 6, for example, they're like chopping out they're chopping out so much stuff that they would normally just give you. And I think it's just changed people's mentalities when they develop games, because now it's just kind of like give you the base experience and then you can just wait or pay for like the entire experience. Where before DLC was around, if they wanted you to play with all these costumes, they had to get it on the base game. There was no other way. So usually games, when you look back on them, just had more content in them, and they weren't trying to milk these games. And I feel like that's kind of what DLC's become, and it's kind of become so accepted now we don't really think about it as much anymore.
Well, let me play devil's advocate for a second here.
Go ahead.
Look at it this way. Games really haven't changed in price much since the inception of gaming, really, since the 80s. I mean, you still paid $50 for Nintendo games back in the day. I think I paid $80 for Final Fantasy 2 or 4, whatever, back in like the early 90s, And now, I mean, what do you think the development costs were on a Final Fantasy, a 16-bit Final Fantasy game? It probably wasn't $100 million, So the prices, prices of games development has gone skyrocketed into the hundreds of millions for some of these games, and they're still selling them for the same price as they were 30 years ago. So, I mean, that's just one argument that you could say they got to make more money somehow. But at the same time, obviously, some companies are better than others about it. You know, there's companies like CD Projekt Red that I think go about it the right way. And then there's companies like EA that are, you know, just scummy to the max and want to squeeze every single cent out of you, you know?
Yeah, and I know what you're saying there. And, you know, I think most people are are fine with that kind of idea. And maybe I'm a little more unconventional than most people, but I actually don't like this whole model that we're going by now. I mean, whatever the cause is, I don't know, I still don't like it. Like, I don't like this model of we make one game, we're going to sit on this game for like 5 years and just drip feed you DLC, and then 5 years later we make the sequel. I prefer the older style of we make the game, we put as much into it, we make it hot, you buy it, then we make the sequel. Like nowadays, you notice like the amount of sequels or like installments of a series has really dropped off. It's like we make Grand Theft Auto 5, and you're going to play Grand Theft Auto 5 forever we'll just drip feed you DLC forever. It's so, I don't know. I don't like that. Because it gets stale to me. It gets really stale.
Yeah.
And it's funny, there's a game coming out called Neo 2. And what it is they made Neo. They did make a DLC for it, but I didn't buy it. They made Neo. It was a really good game. And then 2 years later, they make Neo 2. And it's funny, some of the reactions people are having, they're like, I don't get it. Why would they make another game that's like the other game, but a little better? Why don't they just make this DLC?
What kind of game is Neo?
It's like Dark Souls, kind of. It's really similar to Dark Souls.
Okay.
Yeah.
Soren, since you're the one who came up with this topic, what do you think? Where do you stand on this?
So, yeah, I've got a few examples of how I feel about DLC. Because I do think there are different ways to do it. And that's why, like, yeah, when I suggested this topic, I said, you know, the good, the bad, and the dishonest. Because I think you do get all three of those. So the examples that I've got for kind of a good way to do DLC, the first one is the new Super Smash Brothers. So Super Smash Brothers Ultimate. Now, some people might argue that the pricing is still too much for what you're getting, because it's I think it's like a $25 season pass that gets you 5 fighter packs. So you get 5 new fighters for the game, and each of those fighters comes with a new stage and a load of new music and all of that. And yeah, an argument could be made for the fact that, like, you know, that's somewhere between, like, you know, a half and a third of the cost of the actual full game for a handful, you know, a very small percentage of what that would equate to on the game itself. So I can kind of see it from that viewpoint. But where I think this is still a good business strategy and a good way of doing DLC is that they knew they wanted to do this, but they hadn't started development on this until they'd finished the actual game. So, you know, although they knew they wanted to do some DLC, you know, they weren't trying to kind of they weren't kind of trying to pull the wool over our eyes or try and do, you know, any of this, like the fighters are kind of like actually already made and they're on the disc anyway, or, you know, they weren't trying to do anything like that. So they knew they wanted to give people more content, and from what I gather, or what I would guess from the kind of characters they've already announced, is it could even be that some of those, you know, some of those contracts and some of those deals, they're still working them out, you know, because they've got an idea of who they want to bring into this game, and they might still be in negotiations with people for all we know. But I think they're a good example of like a way to do it right. But the one that I think is probably a bit better is, are you familiar with, I know actually, Zack, I know that me, you and Justin have spoken about this before, but have you guys both heard of Binding of Isaac?
Yep.
I can't remember if you've both played it, or I know, yeah, Mark, have you played Binding of Isaac?
Yes, I have.
Cool. So that, I think, is a really good example of how to do DLC properly. In that, the game came out, it was out for absolutely ages before they even considered doing a DLC. And then they did a DLC pack, and it was a really reasonable price for an absolute shit ton of more content. Like, it practically doubled the game. And they even did things like, I'm sure they offered me, like, because I've got it on Steam, and I'm sure there was like a loyalty discount. So, like, if you'd already had the game for so long or something like that, you've got a discount on the DLC. And they've just added loads of stuff. There's been like free updates as it's gone on as well, and just everything they add, it's, you know, the most they can add for a really good and reasonable price.
You know who has the best, I think, DLC system of anyone?
Who's
No Man's Sky, Hello Games. It's all free.
I mean, yeah, that
You can't beat that, man.
Yeah, they're
yeah,
like,
that
"Here,
one's
here's the
great.
game."
But I mean, you know, it's that's.
But then again, you could say that
they're making up for
they're making
a
up
bad
for
launch. Yeah,
a bad launch.
for
Yeah.
sure.
I don't want to run over Soren's topic too much, but it's interesting he brought up DLC in fighting games, because that is such a back and forth topic for me in my head, because you know, like the de facto justification for DLC could be fighting games, because before DLC came along, Street Fighter Hyper Fighting, Street Fighter 2 Turbo Edition, Street Fighter Turbo Max Ultra Edition, because to upgrade anything, they'd have to resell you the game. So like Street Fighter 4 has like 4 or 5 different versions, because they
I paid $80 for Street Fighter Special Champion Edition on Genesis. I had Street Fighter 2 on Super Nintendo, but I wanted the Champion Edition with the 4 extra characters, so I paid $80 for you're right, and that basically was DLC. It's the same game, just with some extra features.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think there was a better way of doing that. Like, I think Sega and Namco did way better jobs about that, and Capcom was just milking it really hard. But it is an interesting topic, because with fighting games now, how it is so they, even Smash Bros, I know people love Smash Bros, but they give you the base roster. Smash Bros is a lot more generous, which is nice. Yeah. And then what they do is they drop in DLC characters to like keep people excited about the games. Like, oh, have you played Soul Calibur? 2B's in it now. Or have you played, Tekken? Akuma's in it now, or whatever it is. And for fighting games, I kind of see why they do that, because fighting games are such a community-based gaming experience where if you don't keep people excited, people leave, and then you have no one to play against. So for fighting games, I'm kind of like, I get it. I don't like it because you buy Soul Calibur 6, and you can tell there are 4 characters they're trying to sell me that I know would be in the game normally otherwise. Like, what was that character I've been playing? It's like Rose or something like that. Like, she's such a character that would be in the game normally, but they DLC'd her because they're like, hey,
gotta get you to buy something.
we gotta give you something. So
I don't know if you guys remember, but like back in the early 90s, I think the early 90s, yeah, is in essence when DLC started. But on the PC, it was literal DLC in some cases. Like the Wing Commander games, you could buy the speech pack that would make everybody talk. You could buy, there were expanded mission packs you could buy. Even the Ultima games, which I talked about last episode, had expansion packs you could buy that would give you more game. But guess what? That was EA even back then. EA is like, I wonder who created. I want to say it's probably EA that created the whole concept of expansion packs and DLC, but it's because it's been going on.
Might be Blizzard too. I mean,
yeah.
We don't even think about them as DLC because they're so legendary. Like StarCraft Brood War is still one of my favorite games ever, but if you think about it, it is an expansion pack to StarCraft.
Yeah, but even that was in the late 90s. Like the first Wing Commander was like 1990 or 91.
Wow.
You could buy speech packs and expanded mission packs and things. You go to the Software Etc. Electronics Boutique, and they had the box sitting there next to the regular box, and
yeah.
I bought them, dude. I wanted to hear them talk. I wanted to hear my pilots talk, so I bought the freaking speech pack for $20. It's like, even back then, even 30 years ago, man, it's crazy. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's something that's actually been around a long time, but now with the advent of the internet and the fact you can download anything in seconds, a lot of times it's like they're just
Yeah.
they can milk you, so they do. You know.
I feel
It
like
looks like the first expansions were like tabletop games in the 70s, which honestly makes sense. But they've been doing it for PC games since floppy disks were the size of a napkin.
Okay.
See the with the fighting games, like I know I mentioned Smash Brothers as a good example of DLC, but I think that they do kind of tip into that region, whereas like like all of your other fighting games, I think they're not necessarily good DLC strategies, but they're not bad either. I mean, they're good for the sense of, like you said, they kind of keep interest and prolong interest in the game, but yeah, it's not kind of good or bad. It's kind of like it kind of averages out because it's like it keeps interest in the game, but like you said, you're looking at like 4 to 6 DLC characters that probably would have actually been in the original game if they weren't planning for DLC, whereas Smash Brothers, I think, kind of tips up into that good section because they really gave us everything they possibly could in the time they had for development. And then the DLC, although they knew they were going to do DLC, it's, you know, they hadn't planned it all so far in advance that they were like, okay, cool, well, we'll hold off on these characters because they'll be really good for DLC. It's like, no, they wanted to give us absolutely everything. And then even now with the DLC, they're trying to, you know, do contract negotiations to get some amazing characters that you just wouldn't expect to be in there. So it's like, it's kind of, it's like a good way to do a DLC because it's not a scummy way. They're not trying to, like, you know, do anything that seems underhanded with it.
Well,
yeah.
why don't we talk about the worst examples of DLC now? Since we seem to cover some of the better ones, why don't we talk about the worst offenders?
Oh, there's so many.
Think of. Let me start with one, and it's the most obvious, which is Battlefront 2.
Oh my god!
From the end of last year or the end of the year before last or whatever. I remember reading that in order to unlock all the additional content, it would take you 4,500 hours of grinding in order to do it. Or you could just buy everything, you know. Not to mention the loot boxes and, you know, the other craziness that was in there.
I have hands-on experience with that because I usually don't buy EA games, but I had a soft spot for Battlefront on the Xbox. Like, me and my brother loved that game. We played it so much. You know, I don't think EA made that one. I think that was the LucasArts, right?
Yeah, it wasn't.
Yeah, it wasn't. EA had nothing to do with it. Anyway, so I kind of gave in. I was like, okay, I know it's not like the real deal, but me and my brother want to play Battlefront together again and like play the co-op missions. There are no co-op missions. There's like nothing. There's like no content in the game. And then I was like, okay, I guess we'll have to play multiplayer. And the multiplayer sucked because people were just buying all the guns, like buying pay to win. And so we played that for one weekend, and we really regretted buying it.
This was the first Battlefront, like the first reboot.
No, the first reboot. So the EA Battlefront.
Okay.
Yeah, and after that, I said, I'm not buying another EA game. I just got robbed because this is awful.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I had the exact same disappointment. Like you said, where you get it and you look at it and you're like, where are all the modes?
There's
like,
nothing.
Where is everything? There's nothing. There's like a few challenge missions and then multiplayer, and that's it.
I think the second game had a single player mode, right? But I think they said it maybe took 5 or 6 hours to finish, but at least there was a single player mode in the second game. Yeah. But the shitstorm that happened after the whole loot box controversy and lawmakers got involved, and what a disaster, man. That was to the point where EA had to roll it all back, you know, most of it. And I think Disney got pissed off, and so now isn't there other companies developing Star Wars games now, or is it still just EA?
I think EA still has it, but
that needs to go to somebody else, or at least to another company. My God, man, why are you going to let EA?
I'm sure somebody else was working on something else. I know EA are doing that one that's meant to be they're doing one that's meant to be a single player game, and basically everyone's like, yeah, we don't trust you, EA. You're definitely going to put like some sort of bullshit in it. Yeah, This just seems to have been like a few years of them going like, no, guys, come on, trust us. Like, no, you've not earned that trust, EA, I'm afraid.
Nope, not even close. I mean, look at The Sims 4 is another one where I think The Sims 4 has like the most expansion packs of like any
Oh my god,
ever made.
I have them all because let me explain the story. It's a funny story. I have them all. I have every single one.
Wait, the Sims 4, there's DLC for DLC. There's like a cat and dog expansion pack or something that goes with one of the expansion packs that was already released. So you can't play the dog and cat expansion pack unless you already own one of the other expansion packs. That's how crazy it is.
So let me tell you the story of how I don't know about all the DLC, but I must have most of it. Someone I know in my family loved The Sims. Like it was their favorite series. And so they did buy every single one. And one day they just had enough. And they're like, I'm done with this series. And they handed me them all. And it's like a stack of this many. I'm not kidding. It's bigger than the frame. So many discs. I was like, what am I going to do with these? And they're like, well, you collect games. Here you go. Take them. So and I tried to resell them. I was like, no one wants these. These are like garbage. I could throw them for Frisbees for my dog. I don't know what I'm going to do with them.
I'm sure The Sims is fun. I've never played any of them, but I did have a roommate in college who was obsessed with the series. I think it was the original Sims way, way back. But yeah, dude, like just milking it to the max. Another one that I thought of, and this is one I experienced myself, and I actually experienced this one in game. Didn't know it was coming. But have any of you played the original Dragon Age Origins?
A little bit.
Okay, well, there's a campfire area, like your camp where you go, and there's this guy showed up after a mission in the camp, and I'm like, oh, who are you? And I go up and talk to him, and guess what? He starts talking to me about something, and then all of a sudden he's trying to sell me DLC for the game. And I was just like, are you kidding me? Just talk about immersion breaking, man.
That does suck.
It was horrible, man. It was like, I wasn't like super offended, but I started laughing. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. This guy's this NPC is trying to sell me DLC in the game.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
it's like, I have this quest for this ancient family sword that I need to go and find, and it'll only cost you like $4.99 to go.
That's exactly what it was. He started talking about a quest. I'm like, oh, this sounds cool. And then he's like, oh, by the way, you got to pay for it. This little thing pops up, and I'm like,
you son of a bitch. That's awful.
I never did it. I'm like, fuck that. I don't need this.
That's kind of like. It kind of reminds you of like when you go in the grocery store and you need to get milk, and they like throw all the candy bars on the way to the milk, and they're like, come on, you want some candy. It's like, son of a bitch, I'm just trying to buy some milk. I think that's what a lot of these tactics are, where they get you in the door and they're like, you're having fun, and then they're like, bam, DLC? Well, why not, dude? It's right here.
Come on, DLC. Oh man. Okay, well, I think we'll on that note, I think we'll take a break, and when we come back, we will do our second topic. We will be right back. We're back for our second topic, which is misunderstood retro games. So some people play new games, some people play old games, some people play both, like I think most of us. But there is certainly a large portion of gamers that only play the latest and greatest in games. And I know quite a few people like this. And, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's when someone criticizes something old without ever really giving it a fair shake that I think things become a little bit, unfair. So many retro games get looked at in this light due to judgment based on the era in which they were released, rather than if they were actually a good game or not. So, with that in mind, we'd like to talk about some of our personal picks and maybe of misunderstood retro games and maybe the broader topic overall. So since Mark came up with this, what did you call it? An esoteric topic?
Esoteric.
Yes.
Once you guys hear about
we'll let you start us.
It's hard to think about, but once you see it, you know it. It's kind of like, oh, I know what you're talking about. Because I feel like another version of this topic could be gaming hipsters and how annoying they are. Like people who think they know better than the rest of the gaming community because they're snazzy and fresh. And so what they do is they go around and they pick games that are well regarded or people like, and they kind of come up with really specific reasons why these games are actually bad that aren't really well justified. So Here's a really common one that I see all the time, and it drives me absolutely crazy, is that, so Goldeneye. People talk about Goldeneye, and they say, oh, it's a multiplayer, one of the first-person shooters on the N64. It was influential, but when you go back, it's a piece of shit because the controls suck and all this stuff. And they talk about these topics like they know exactly what they're talking about, but with GoldenEye, for instance, a lot of people complain about the controls and say, well, the controls are so whack because it's just one analog stick. And a lot of people don't realize that GoldenEye has like 5 different control schemes in there, including one where you can play with 2 controllers at once called Overkill, and you have 2 analog sticks.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, you want 2 analog sticks, you can actually do that. It's called Overkill. So they don't even know that. And then also, most people who speedrun GoldenEye don't play on the default control scheme, 1.1. They play on 1.2. I think it's called Solitaire. I can't remember. Solitaire or something like that. And what that does is instead of mapping that weird kind of strafing to the C buttons, but you're looking and moving with the analog stick, it makes it kind of like Doom, where you look all around with your analog stick, but then move with the C buttons. So like mouse and keyboard. So if you play Solitaire, the controls are actually completely fine. You just need to go to the options menu and switch it over. But people will write all of these long reviews about that game and how it's so dated and so unplayable these days because of the controls, when they don't even explore the control options. So that's kind of an example of what I'm talking about.
Okay, so they're speaking without much knowledge of what they're speaking about, which
exactly
is a lot of things in life these days, it seems like, you know.
But I feel like they feel a little more comfortable because it's an older game and it's
easy
like
to
just
dismiss.
It's really easy with older games to dismiss how actually in depth a lot of the design work was for these games. They make it seem like just a bunch of monkeys hit a keyboard and out came GoldenEye 007. Like, no, they thought about the control scheme when they're making the game. They thought about how to make it work. So,
and it's also worth noting that like, so I think when I played that, because I played the hell out of that game, and when I played it, I probably just played it on that normal, 1.1 control scheme. But like with anything like that, once you get more and more used to it, it doesn't become an issue. It's only because people are going back, like now, when we've had so many years of controlling first-person shooters with dual analog sticks.
Call of Duty controls, basically.
Exactly, yeah. If you go back to that, of course it's going to feel like completely alien to you. But I guarantee you, if you went back and played GoldenEye on its standard control scheme, and you just played only that for like a month, by the end of that month, you'll be controlling it absolutely fine and having an absolute blast with it. Like,
if someone put you on a desert island and that was the only game you had, you'd probably have fun with it, even if you were first to it at first.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Like, there are games where it's hard to get around that the controls are actually bad. But GoldenEye is not one of those games. But they're just throwing that on it because it's an old game and they're not used to the control scheme. Yeah. But you can get hella precise in that game once you know how to play it. So that's one example of like a misunderstood game from the past where now it's become like a part of the culture or whatever, like gamer culture of GoldenEye 007, bad controls. We'll just say that. Even if we don't know what we're talking about, we'll just say that when we're talking about the game or doing a review or doing a retrospective. So there's an example of what I have in mind. I have a few more, but...
Meanwhile, Derik has a video of is it a Doom mod?
Yeah, Doom 2
GoldenEye
mod.
Doom 2 mod.
I could not click on
it. I'm watching. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, do another one, Mark, while you're going. Give us another example.
Okay. So it ties into a game you mentioned earlier, which is Star Fox. So one that really drives me crazy is Star Fox 64.
I knew you were going to do this one.
Yeah, I'm going to get you. No, Star Fox 64. I love Star Fox 64. It's one of my favorite games. And one thing, and as a shmup player too, shmup people are a little sensitive about this anyway. You'll hear reviews of Star Fox 64. It's a good game, but you can beat it in 30 minutes. It's like, it's only a 30-minute game. Looking back on it, it hasn't aged well because it's only a 30-minute game or whatever. It's like, homie, you don't beat Star Fox in 30 minutes, okay? You get to Venom on the default settings in 30 minutes, but Like, people don't understand that there's a lot more to that game than surviving a stage and beating Andros and then the game's over. There's the meddling system and the expert system, which most people don't even talk about. And I feel like the game was designed to encourage you to meddle the stages. And so just flying through them and surviving isn't, in my opinion, isn't beating the game. It's just getting through the first part of it.
Is Star Fox one of the games that got you in the shmups in the first place? Star Fox 64?
Mm-hmm.
Probably.
Yeah, definitely. I used to go to the arcade, play Raiden 2, and then go home and play Star Fox 64. It's like...
It's funny because that's the same with the original. Well, I played shmups before the original Star Fox, but the original Star Fox was one of the, what I would consider one of my, the most influential shmups, if you want to call it that, of my childhood, you know. But obviously I played games like Life Force and games that were earlier than that. But yeah, so that's pretty interesting. What about you, Soren? What do you think?
So I think I misunderstood the point of this topic. No, so I think I've got something that kind of fits. Well, I've got a couple of things. So the first is, so I kind of, I thought of it more in terms of not quite what you've just described there, but a game that is kind of misunderstood in that it's very niche and has a very, very specific fan base, and I think it deserves to be bigger than that. I think it deserves to be more well-known and more played than it is. And specifically the game is Fire Pro Wrestling World on Steam, and I think it's on PS4 as well. But it generally, the whole Fire Pro series, if you've not heard of them, they're basically
I have.
They're 2D. They're hard to describe.
They're wrestling games, aren't they? They're like customized wrestling games.
Yeah, they're predominantly wrestling, but you can do cage fighting in them and things like that. And they're kind of, they're 2D, so they look like, even the most recent one, which came out like last year or something, it looks like it could have been on the SNES, you know, or
yeah, you're right.
Technology. Like, it looks it's got a very specific art style. But I think that's what puts some people off, because if you get into it and if you actually start kind of digging, you know, deeper into the mechanics and that, it is so deep and there's so much to it. And because they let the users basically create kind of anything they want on there, you can have, if you're a wrestling fan, you can basically, you know, name a wrestler and somebody will have made them for that game, and you can just go and download them. But they also do, you know, because they do the MMA stuff on there, you've got all the MMA fighters, you've got, it can get ridiculous. Like, I've seen people hold massive battle royals that are all like 80s cartoon characters and things like that, like, because people just make anything and everything for this game. But it's just incredibly deep. Like, you know, you'd not, like, just look at some footage of it, you would think, like, you know, oh, okay, there's a punch button and there's a kick button and then there's a grab button, and, you know, and that's it. It goes way deeper than that. Like, there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of moves and different ways that you can punch and kick, and yeah, like, it's worth
due to the way it's presented, you're saying that it's misunderstood by most people. I can see where you're going with that. Yeah, because looking at the footage now, and yeah, it definitely looks like maybe a 16 or 32-bit era game, you know. Yeah. And but yeah, I see what you're saying. It makes a lot of sense.
And the fan base for it is really, you know, the communities around it are really good, and there are some hella dedicated people to that series. But yeah, I think there's a lot of more kind of I don't know what the word would be. Like, I want to say general, but you kind of, yeah, you're people who aren't like super into it. Your general wrestling fans or fighting game fans or people like that, they've probably taken a look at it and gone, oh, okay, yeah, whatever, and just moved on. And I think that's definitely down to the art style.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. The game, I'll go ahead and talk about the game that I'm going to talk about, which this is a game that I've defended probably since it came out, honestly. about 30 years, almost 30 years ago, 29, 28 years ago.
Wow.
And I'll do what Justin always does, and I'll build up to it, and then drop it on you, So
Okay.
so
Should we guess what it is?
You'll never be able to guess what it is because it's a really niche, strange game that was released on it was on the SNES. It was also on the Amiga. I think it was originally on the Amiga. It was on I want to say the Atari ST and DOS and a couple other PCs at the time. It was I didn't know it at the time, but it was the first RPG that I ever played. I didn't realize it at the time because I looked at it and thought, "What the hell is this? What am I doing? What do I do with this strange world, that I'm in?" And basically, I had the Super Nintendo version, and my uncle got me a Super Nintendo in Christmas of 1991, which was, I think, not long after it came out in the US anyway. And he got me Super Mario World, and he got me this. And I think it's because they were only 2 games on the shelf, other than I think maybe Gradius 3 and maybe a few others. There weren't that many launch games, were there? Maybe 3 or 4. And so, he got this game for me. And after I played Super Mario World all day, I popped this in, and I was like, okay. But the game is Drakkhen. Now, if any of you heard of Drakkhen?
Yeah, the name.
I know Derik has.
Mm-hmm.
No.
I was already looking it up.
Yeah, well, Derik knows because I've written about this game and I've talked about it for years, and I love it. But yeah, basically, it's a pretty hardcore RPG. But it's really it's the type of game where nowadays someone looks at it and they're like, because it's got a 3D environment, and there's some janky polygons in there, and it's like a mix of polygons and sprites, I guess, kind of mix the two together. But it's really hard to find your way around. There's nothing really that points you in any direction of where you're supposed to go. It's a big open world, and it doesn't hold your hand in any way, shape, or form. And I think most people, and I've seen videos of people making fun of this game, Let's Plays, and they'll put this game on. They're like, what the hell is this? This is so stupid, And it's like, the funny thing was, I kind of thought the same thing when I picked it up originally, because I didn't know what the hell I was doing. But a year later, I had the game for a year, right? And then the following Christmas, I think my brother put the game in, and like, I'm going to try this game again. And he figured it out. He started figuring it out. And so then I figured it out. And then we loved it, and we played it, played it and beat it. I think we both beat the game, which was kind of remarkable for I think it was 1992 at the time. I had no hint guides or nothing, but we just played it so much that we figured out how to do it. But it's a pretty in-depth RPG. The story's a little, I don't know, underwhelming, I guess you could say, but it's really fun to explore. You got four characters in your party. You can go down into dungeons and castles, and I really enjoyed some of the castles you could go down into. You could kind of go into the depths of these creepy castles. The game is super atmospheric, and you'll be walking around. It turns night, and it's got a day-night cycle, which is pretty cool. It'll turn night, and then all of a sudden the constellations of the stars will turn into whatever constellation it is. The monster will come down and attack you, just kind of cool stuff like that. I can already see what's probably coming up on this video, but there's these grave sites around, and if you bump into the grave site, this evil demonic dog just pops up out of nowhere. He avoided it, and just with lasers shooting out of its eyes, and blasts you. But I love the game. It probably doesn't hold up well by today's standards, but I did play through it. I think it was last year I played through it. I wrote an article for the Super Nintendo, the SNES Omnibus by Brett Weiss. He's an author that does video game books, and he's got this book's on Amazon, I think, now, and probably some other places. But I guess I'm published in his book. I wrote a thing on Drakkhen because he asked me, he's like, hey, what's a Super Nintendo game you enjoy? That's kind of unusual. And I'm like, oh, I got just the game. No one else is going to write about this game. So that's kind of cool. But yeah, it's definitely misunderstood for sure, man. Simply because it just drops you in the world and you don't know what the hell to do, And games nowadays would never do that, There's always a tutorial. Even Cuphead has a tutorial, where even I think before the shmup levels, it tells you all the buttons, what to do and everything. So
You know what?
Yeah, most people are very against that style of game design now. Like the figure it out yourself stuff. Like that is very unkosher right now.
Yeah, it is. Well, except for Breath of the Wild. I think Breath of the Wild is the only example I can think of lately that really doesn't hold your hand much. I mean, you get slight little hints here and there. And in Drakkhen, you get hints too, if you can find the place where you get the hints. But yeah, Breath of the Wild. But Breath of the Wild is so brilliantly designed that we talked about this before. Anywhere you go, you're going to find something, you know. And Drakkhen was a little more sparse than that. But if you looked hard enough, you would find things, you know. But what were you going to say, Soren?
I was just going to say that, yeah, it kind of like looking at the footage as well and what you were saying about it. I can't remember if we mentioned this on the last episode of the podcast, but how, you know, sometimes you go back and look at these older games and you're seeing mechanics and things where you're like it's difficult to comprehend that they had that on a game of that generation. So, you know, the fact that this was like a SNES era game and it was
a launch game on the Super Nintendo.
Yeah, that's insane. And it's like a massive open world RPG, kind of a la Skyrim and things like that.
Yeah, it basically is. It is that type of game. And the 3D, the whole 3D pseudo 3D environment they created was impressive for the time. The music is also really good. I remember, and I'm going to sound like a broken record because I've told this story before, not on the podcast, but my mom, who never even gave a second glance to a video game before, she heard the music in this game and she's like, that sounds like real music, you know? And I'm like, really? You noticed my video game I'm playing, you know? So, yeah, it's, that's definitely my misunderstood game is Drakkhen. And I have a lot of nostalgia for it, obviously. I enjoy it. I still enjoy it. You know, it's not a game that I bounced off of when I tried it recently, but I think games like this particularly benefit from modern times because you can just pull up a walkthrough, and if you get stuck, you can figure out what to do, you know, and you don't have to run around for hours and hours and hours trying to, you know, figure out where to go or what to do, you know.
See, it's like something else that's kind of odd. I kind of wanted to look at this from the other angle as well, which is when I was thinking of kind of misunderstanding retro games, I kind of not only wanted to look at it from the viewpoint of, well, here's a game that I do understand and I think the majority of people misunderstand. I also wanted to look at stuff that I looked at and didn't, you know, and I was kind of like, oh, that doesn't look that great or doesn't seem that good. And then I was kind of changed on it.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It's, for me, it's Atari games, just kind of in general, but what kind of got me onto it was there's a YouTube creator called Metal Jesus who does a channel called Metal Jesus Rocks, and he is a big fan of Atari, and one of his favorite games is a game called Hero on the Atari 2600. And so I was watching some of his videos and I saw him talk about this game and I thought, okay, that looks kind of cool, I'll give it a go. And up until that point, my impression of Atari, you know, whenever I'd seen either video footage or screenshots, I was always like, yeah, that looks really basic. And like, okay, I can appreciate it was really good for the time, but I'm not going to go back and play that stuff. And then seeing him kind of talk so enthusiastically about this game, I thought I'll go and give it a try. And it like, it absolutely blew my mind. Because it's not a difficult game and it's not like massively technical, but actually kind of going and playing it, it put me in the mind frame of somebody who would have played that when it first came out, and how groundbreaking that kind of, you know, having that technology at home on your little Atari console, like how mind-blowing that would have been. And it made me appreciate a lot of the Atari library, like from that.
Yeah, that's I'm extremely guilty of kind of throwing Atari games under the bus, and the early, the first gen 3D games, the 32-bit era, which is ironic because I'm playing Star Fox right now, which wasn't that generation, but it might as well have been because it was a polygonal 3D janky sort of game. So yeah, man, you're absolutely right. And I got a lot of bias because the 2600 was my first console I ever owned. But I was so young, I was probably 4, 5, 6 years old, that I don't have super fond memories of playing it. It wasn't until I got the NES that those I really got into gaming, but I do wonder if I go back to some of those Atari, like maybe a game like Pitfall, which I think was a bit more advanced. I think that was probably one of the most advanced games on the 2600. If I tried something like that, if that wouldn't break my bias, I did play through Adventure maybe about 5 years ago, because a friend of mine at a website I was writing for was writing about it, and I was helping him with it. So I played through Adventure, which I basically it was fine, I guess, but I did use a walkthrough to help me get through it, because otherwise I'd just be bumping into walls the whole time. But you're right, though, man. You're right, though. I should try and check myself when it comes to that sort of thing, and not be so harsh on the the first gen of video games, because there are games that are fun. I think I mentioned Pac-Man before. Pac-Man is still a great, fun arcade game. What's the other one I'm trying to think of? Joust. I think Joust is one of my favorite games of all time, honestly. And I played the NES version as the one I have, but it's in essence the same as the arcade and a lot of the other earlier ones. So that's another example. Was Joust on the 2600? I don't remember if it was or not. Probably was.
Yeah, I think it is on there.
I think everything. Yeah. I think everything was on 2600 at one point or another, man.
Like on one of the other podcasts, I know Justin mentioned about this kind of this like retro modern arcade company that is starting to open places in England, where they kind of like bringing back a lot of the old arcade games and trying to get that feel of an old arcade.
Oh yeah, we have those.
Yeah, I think they probably started over in America, but I went to one of those, and honestly, like if you go and check out I think it's like one of the original cabinets for Asteroids, but it's like Asteroids Deluxe or something like that. But literally all this cabinet is it's displaying Asteroids, but like projecting it onto the back of like this, just window, essentially. That's just a bit of glass, and it's entirely monochrome. So it's just, your little white ship and, white asteroids and white bullets. But behind this piece of glass, they've created like a 3D diorama type thing with like hand-painted art. So that's all in kind of like nice hand-painted, like colorful art. And then you have this really vibrant, like ship and asteroids kind of on top of it, creating like a 3D effect. And it is absolutely stunning. like I think even if you went and looked up footage of it's not going to do it justice to like if you went and saw that in person. But if you get a chance to see that or see some good footage of that game in action, like go and watch that and then tell me that you need, 1 million pixels and 4K resolution and, for something to look good, because it's absolutely not true.
I love how we started this off talking about how modern gamers are misunderstanding old games, but then we brought it back to ourselves and our own biases about about the same topic, really. Except
I actually have seen what Soren's talking about. They have a cabinet like that where I go to. It is surprising, like you say. Even playing them on the Atari and stuff doesn't quite do the same justice as the cabinets, because, like you said, the colors of those lines are extremely clean and extremely vibrant. And it's like, whoa, like you don't see that even on modern TVs and stuff. It almost is like when you go to a planetarium and they do like the lasers and stuff. Yeah. It looks something like that. Like it's like, it looks more like a light show than a game.
I have seen those before, and it is really neat. It's very, very cool. Derek's got a video going, but yeah, that's actually, I have seen those before.
It's almost like sorry, go on.
So have you seen the Vectrex? Have you heard of that console before?
It's the only vector-based video game console released, and that's what the Asteroid system was vector graphics. But man,
so it was like that. Yeah, because I played
graphics are really cool.
I played the Vectrex. Remember, Derek, we were at MoGameCon last year, I think. And
because you wouldn't let me steal it.
Yeah, we were at MoGameCon last year, and they had a plethora of old consoles, all setups you could play, and the Vectrex was one of them. And I think I got it on video of me playing it, and it looked a lot like that thing that what Soren was talking about and what Derek was just showing there, where it's very. I think I played Star Trek the game, and it's like a shooter. It's basically like a pseudo 3D kind of shooter, and with all, those vector style graphics with the really bright lines and colors. Very cool, man. Yeah, it's.
I think one of the original Star Wars games uses it as well, because there's that Star Wars cabinet game where you're holding the TIE fighter controls, and you're basically just doing the trench run on the Death Star, where you've got to like go through the trench and kind of dodge all the bullets and then shoot down the exhaust pipe. It's that, but it must be using that same thing because it's incredibly vibrant and like crisp and just stunning in real life.
It is. It's a vector game.
Yeah. So they were really messing around with 3D games back in the early 80s, man. And all, look at that. That's freaking cool, man. That's trippy.
That looks so good.
It's.
Apologies to all the people listening to
who
this.
Can't. Yeah, they're listening. But it's basically it looks kind of like Star Fox, except it's in the cockpit and just a bunch of bright, colorful wireframe 3D. That's what you're looking at. Very cool.
It looks like Tron.
Yeah, it looks kind of like Tron actually, and I guess that the whole 3D thing started in the early 80s. Honestly, maybe even earlier than that. I'm not an expert, but. Yeah, cool. All right. Well, I think that's a good place to end it. Thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone. And on behalf of Soren Day, Mark MSX, the guy who we don't know his last name,
we will find
it. And our producer, Derik Moore, I'm Zach Smith. We'll see you next time. Later.
Laters, guys. One of the things I had as an example was Call of Duty. Like I bought Black Ops 4, and it took me way too long to work out what the fuck I needed to buy, because they had so many different versions that had this season pass and this thing and this thing, and I was like, just give me the one that has all the stuff, please. Like I just want the things, but I want the useful things. I don't want a little fucking medal and some like patches to put on my bomber jacket I apparently have. I don't know. Like I don't need all of that crap. I just wanted like the game and its content, and that was hard enough. And then when that game came out, and I shit you not, I must have spent close to like $100 on getting the game and the season pass and then sure that it had everything, so I was going to get all the maps and all the content. And then it came out and they started doing that whole, the kind of season-y thing that like Fortnite does.
Yep.
They did that plus loot crates plus like all this, and I'm like, I've already spent $100 on that. Can you not? Like, I don't want to have to pay for fucking premium season ladders and loot crates and.
I didn't interject this, but I wanted to say this: the Battlefront 2 thing we're talking about, to get all the stuff unlocked, would either take 4,358 hours of gameplay or $2,100.
Oh my
God!
God!
That shit.
Yeah.
And there's our outtake, folks.